Go.
Hi everyone, my name is Brad Stokes. I am the Extension Educator for Elmore County. I'm located in Mountain Home, Idaho, and I have a bachelor's degree in plant science with a minor in crop science and a master's in science of entomology. So today I'm going to be talking about rangeland pollinators in Idaho. And there's my contact information. If you have a question after this presentation, feel free to send it to me. The quick little outline, we're going to go over bee anatomy, the general life cycle of a bee, and the wonderful bee diversity we see in North America. We'll differentiate between male bees and female bees. We'll talk about bee foraging, dances, and their eyesight. We'll cover economic value, rangeland ecosystem in Idaho. I put in a slide about murder hornets as well because I feel we can't talk about pollinators right now without mentioning murder hornets. And we'll also talk about some of the other pollinators you might see in the rangeland ecosystems. Bee anatomy, like all insects, bees have three parts. Three tagmata. You have the head at the top, then followed by the thorax, then the abdomen. At the front of the head, you have your mandibles, you have your antennae, and then the thorax is all locomotion. So you have the attachment of the wings and the legs. It's interesting to note the antennal cleaner on the foreleg. So that's for scraping off pollen. And then with the wings, you have this coupling mechanism, and we refer to it as hamuli on the hind wing, and it interlocks the forewing to form kind of like a jet wing. The abdomen has the stinger at the very end, so that's for defensive behavior. And then you also have this pollen basket, and this is a generalized bee diagram, more so of a honeybee. And there is the hamuli up close. I believe this is probably where the inventor of Velcro got the idea because it's such a neat, innovative mechanism for wing coupling in insects. With bees and the different types of species we have here, there's basically only two areas for pollen transferring. On the left, you have a general honeybee. And do you see the pollen there on the hind leg? That's what we refer to as the pollen basket. On the right, you have a leaf cutting bee. And underneath the abdomen, you have these really, really fine hairs, and that's where they carry their pollen. So depending on the family, the genus, the species of the bee, they're going to carry their pollen in different areas. Bee life cycle. Bees are part of what entomologists call holometabolists insects or holometabula. This just means they have a complete life cycle, much like a butterfly. So you have 4 life stages, starting with the egg hatching into a larva, and then a pupa, and then the adult emerges. For most bees, you have 1 queen per colony. Bees can be solitary, social, or eusocial. Solitary bees are going to be your ground nesting bees, your leaf cutting bees. Social bees, a little more advanced, and then completely to eusocial or total social is the honeybees. Larvae are fed by workers in each of the colonies. Honeybee queens live for 2 or more years. After about the 4th year, they're not so productive. And workers for honeybees in the middle of summer live only 5 to 6 weeks. Sometimes a little bit longer depending on the resources. And on the right side, we have this great little life cycle of a bee diagram. You can see the queen laying the egg in the cell, and the larvae growing, it pupates, and then an adult emerges. So how many bees do we have? In short, a lot. So worldwide, we have 25,000 known bee species. Here in North America, we have 4,000 species. That is an incredible number. And we have a lot of different families. You have Apidae, which is the honey and bumblebees. the Melididae, which are very rare bees, the Megachilids, they're leaf-cutting bees, mason bees. Then you have Halictidae, the sweat bees, and then Andrenidae, the ground nesting bees. And I think this diagram on the right shows the diversity and morphological adaptations of each bee. Depending on their life cycle, they might have modified legs, wings, antennae, and different body structures. Females versus males. In most colonies, the female compromises most of the colony in total numbers. Females are the only ones that can sting because they have a modified ovipositor called a sting apparatus. So like I said, females are the only ones that can sting because of their modified ovipositor. We call it a stinger or a sting apparatus. Females do all the work in foraging for the colony, and males are only in there for reproduction. And if it is a solitary species, you have very few male eggs that are laid and that emerge. The sting apparatus, a bee versus a wasp. On the left, you have a bee, and you can see that it's barbed at the tip. This is a scanning electron micrograph. So when that bee stings you and tries to fly off, that stinger and that venom sac are still there. While on the right, you have a sheathed wasp sting apparatus. So that wasp can sting you multiple times. Stings, bees, wasps, ants, they always sting in a defensive behavior to protect their hive or themselves. If stung, try and remove the entire apparatus. So you're trying to grab that venom sac, the stinger, and remove it all. I know that credit cards work great for scraping them off. Some people have anaphylactic shock or systemic allergy, and you can kind of tell that they might begin going into this with wheezing and breathing and a drop in blood pressure. If that happens, get that person emergency help right away. And on average, about 50 people die a year from bee stings. For most other stings, some ice, some cold packs, soap and water, and Benadryl is great. And bee or wasp sting, that is a bee sting because you have the venom sac attached to the stinger. Reactions to stings, this just kind of sums up what the three types are according to the medical professionals. You have the normal sting, and that's the most common. You just get localized pain, swelling, redness around that area. That's what I am like when I am stung. The second type is a localized reaction. It's less common that you'll get real reactions that extend beyond the site. So they'll go 4+ inches away and you might recover in 5 to 10 days. And then you have the allergic, uncommon, systemic, where you do get this swelling and it's very, very, very dangerous. The treatment is usually epinephrine and an EpiPen. So if you need to consult your medical professional regarding medical questions and or advice on stings and reactions. Anywhere between 9 to 15 million people in the US may be allergic to any number of stings and or venom. It is important to note that within the venom complex that you have various proteins. So you might be allergic to honeybees, but not allergic to another type of bee. So that's something to note there. Bee foraging. Bees can be generalists, so they're feeding on any number of flowering plants, or specialists, where they only feed on one or two species. It depends on their mouth parts. You have short tongue versus long tongue bees. As far as honeybees, one female bee only creates 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in their entire lifetime. So that's a lot of work for a really, really tiny amount of honey, and it's all species specific. Honeybees dance. So I don't know if anyone knows that, but they do dance. They have a round dance at the top and then a waggle dance. The round dance is for close nectar resources. So these are females that are foraging and then come back to the colony and let their sisters know where that good nectar is. The waggle dance is for long distance nectar resources, and it really includes distance and direction in their dance. It's quite interesting. There's several scientific papers on honeybee dancing, and it's really, really remarkable. Bee eyesight. On the top here, you can see what I'd call the human spectrum, or what we see at, more this blue, green, a little bit of the red, whereas the bee is seeing at the blue, green, and then the UV spectrum. Humans, we cannot see at the UV spectrum. We don't have those receptors in our eyesights. And flowers are interesting because they emit this UV light and attract the bee there to land on. So they're really advertising their nectar and pollination services. Bee needs, what do they need? Nectar, huge. So you need flowering angiosperms, flowers, etc., and you need them flowering throughout the season, preferably close. So honeybees, they travel up to 4 miles away. Some of the other bees, it might just be a mile, maybe a mile and a half at max. Water, they need water, just like all other animals. On the right, you see some really cute watering dishes. And you could put these in your backyard, and you'll see bees come there in the summer. And then protection. For honeybees, you have a high box. And then for all the other solitary bees, you're going to have a nest of some type, whether it's in the ground, or if it's in a twig, or a log, or some other thing in nature. The economic value of bees, the honeybee value in the US alone, we're talking $24+ billion a year, and this is old information. The native wild bee value in the US is valued about $4+ billion a year. And then I always mention the chocolate midge because I think it's so interesting. There's a small little fly in the tropics that only pollinates the cacao plant, and the value of the chocolate midge is 5.7 billion a year. And again, that's just US dollars. So Idaho rangeland, that's kind of what I notice when I look out mountain home. You have native introduced grasses, fescues, cheatgrass. We have a lot of Medusa head rye right now, forbs, sagebrush, bitterbrush, weeds, and wildflowers. Water is somewhat scarce, but abundant in the mornings. And then in the summer, you have guttation, and that is the plant that's just getting rid of some water, and that happens at night, but there is some there in the mornings for bees. What I do notice about this rangeland photo is all the beautiful flowers there. So that is a great resource for bees. Rangeland bee species commonly present here. So these are the ones that I've kind of picked out, and I've kind of highlighted just specific genera here. We have desert bees, so Diadasia, Melisodes. These are solitary gregarious bees. Gregarious kind of refers to all of these bees nest in the same habitat. So you might run across a site where you see 20 or 30 all grouped together. You have sweat bees, Agapostomon, Lasioglossum, and Halictus. They're solitary gregarious. Mason bees are beautiful, Osmia, and then you have leafcutter bees, Megachile, and those are the genera again. They're again solitary. We have bumblebees, Bombus, various species, big, beautiful, black, yellow, white, orange, good colors. they're social and it depends on the species. We have digger bees in the genus Anthophora, and just a few of these species. We have longhorned or squash bees, Pepinapis, and then of course honeybees, Apis mellifera, and they're totally social or eusocial, and you only see these where they're introduced and managed. Usually, sometimes there are some wild colonies. So here's a quick kind of rundown of what these bees look like and what you might see out in your rangeland. I would note that all of these on this slide are ground nesting bees and or leaf cutting bees. So they're gonna nest in the ground like this diadasia up here at the top. So if you see holes like that while you're out wandering the rangeland, it's probably a bee. And just note how beautiful these creatures are. The next slide has some of the other bees we have. Bombus navidensis is the biggest bumblebee we have. Very, very large bee. And you kind of notice this black mark right at the top of the thorax. And then there's a few other bombus species I've highlighted. Bombus fervidus is the most common. And then Anthophora, those eyes are just crazy cool looking. Pepinapis is the squash bee, and then on the bottom right you have the common honeybee. I think it's interesting to note the diversity we see here just in Idaho and in our rangelands. So in 2018, I did an Elmore County bee survey. I had 3 trap dates, 4 ecosystems, which included ag, rangeland, urban, and forestry. And I had 12 locations throughout the county. I had an elevation gradient, 2,300 to a little over 5,000 feet. And I was trying to examine the biodiversity and get a baseline bee survey here down in Elmore County. There I am holding the traps. Those are blue vein traps, and the bee flies into the blue part and drops in the yellow part. And it was about a 100-mile trap line, so it took all day to do this. Here's some preliminary data, and I think this is kind of cool. On the y-axis, you have the number of individual species present, and then on the x-axis, you have the trap elevation. And it was interesting to me to note that all 3 of these, as trap elevation goes up, you see the number of individual species go up. So that's interesting. And then in, what was it, the 21st of September, we see a big decrease at that 3299 site. So I don't know what happened there, but again, this is preliminary data. This is the bee species composition that I found, and I think we had about 67 different species. They're all listed at the bottom, and it's hard to read, but quite interesting. And I think this just shows the biodiversity that is out there that most people don't see. You can now understand how complicated that ecosystem really is and how many species are present. This was my calculated Shannon's H index for each ecosystem. Shannon's H is a biodiversity measure. You can see rangeland on the left is the blue. The highest biodiversity I've found was agriculture, actually, with the urban at the bottom, and then forestry and rangeland were very similar. My species evenness on this also shows that that composition of species was more even in agriculture and varied in the other ecosystems. So how can we help our bees? Conservation, endangered plants, flowers, especially the angiosperms, wildflowers, native plant species proliferation and protection, reducing pesticide impacts, neonicotinoid uses where applicable. Keep in mind fire, because down here in Mountain Home in Elmore County, we have a lot of fire. Water ecosystems are important, and be aware of pollinator refuge sites, locations, and possible nest sites, and then other pollinator species present, and that's the next slide. This just highlights, we have moths, we have butterflies. This top right is actually a syrphid fly. Bottom left is a clarid, so that's a beetle. In the middle, you have a parasitoid wasp that's free living. And I threw in a hummingbird. Sphecids, or ground nesting parasitoids, we see these a lot. Very common, very, very beneficial. They prey on orthopterans, other big pest insects. And we have been inundated with murder hornet questions around these. So I think that leads into my next slide about murder hornets real quick. Vespa mandarinea. It's a very large hornet. This is the Asian giant hornet you'll see in the news a lot. And this really is a true hornet in the genus Vespa. We don't have any true hornets here. And when I made this slide, it was known that they had underground nests, and that might play in another couple slides. This was the Washington State Department of Agriculture Hornet Watch site, and these were sightings up to December 2019, with the red ones being a positive ID. They were up here in Blaine, Washington, I believe, Whatcom County. So in 2019, you only saw 1 or 2 or 3 positives. And then in October, this month of 2020, right before this presentation, I downloaded it, and you see a lot more positive IDs. And murder hornet considerations real quick. Invasion biology is a process. It all takes time, so they would really have to move a long distance, about 900 miles to get here. And I know that Washington and British Columbia are working on it. Early detection, rapid response is usually the strategy that is undertaken. Just today in KTVB, murder hornet nest found. This is the first official nest found in the United States of America. And they found it in Washington State in Whatcom County, and I think that is Blaine. So this is something to keep an eye on. It's quite interesting. This was published this morning at 9:19 Mountain Time, so that's quite interesting. Bee nesting sites diagram. Again, we have 4,000 species of native bees, and 70% or more of them nest in the ground. So on the right, you have this little squash bee, and see the nest and the cells, and they're going to lay their egg there and provision it with nectar resources. Quite interesting. On the left, you have the classic honeybee, so the nesting sites and locations vary. Tips on enhancing nesting habitat. You can do bee blocks. I made these. You drill into wood. Logs and snags are great. Bare ground, you can clear some vegetation. Sand pits are great, as long as you have a mixture of sand particles. You want small to big sizes, and it has to be well drained. And then I did not know this until today, but you can build a bumblebee nest box as long as it's untreated wood, about 7 inches by 7 inches by 7 inches, with ventilation holes, an entrance, and a drainage hole. So you could attract some bumblebees to your ecosystem or house. Why not celebrate pollinators? So I do this in Elmore County in Mountain Home. We go down to the farmer's market, usually on normal years, and celebrate bees. On the left, you see a little girl in a bee costume, and on the right, you have some bees, some educational information, and we try and highlight. The North American Pollinator Protection Campaign is also a great thing to try and follow. Now, I also have the U of I Extension Pollinator Protection website. Right here on the bottom right, there's the address if you want to visit that, just to help pollinators. Here in Mountain Home, we are a Bee City USA affiliate, as well as a Monarch City USA affiliate. I also like to give a little shout out to Jason Thomas. Me and him created the Idaho Insect Identification website, and this is for use of the public to take pictures, take videos, and submit it online. And I believe you can submit photos as big as 25 megabytes or videos, and me and Jason will get back to you as soon as possible. And this has been a great resource. Ever since this launched, we've had, I'm thinking, a couple hundred requests, so it's been very successful so far. And with that, I would take any questions, and feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call anytime.
Great, thank you, Brad. We appreciate your time today, and we look forward to learning even more about pollinators throughout all of our research and education. So thank you for your time. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
You too.
Okay, we're gonna turn it over to Bracken Henderson now, so let him introduce himself. And Bracken, you are muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Bracken Henderson, University of Idaho Extension in Franklin County. That's in the far southeast corner of the state, near Preston, Idaho. Another neighboring town is just 30 minutes from Logan, Utah, if you know where that's at. And I'm going to be talking to you today about soils, talking just one very specific item, soil texture for you, but let's just go ahead and get started and say, what is soil? And I'm doing this to just show you just a little bit of a different way of doing things. Soil is a mineral and/or organic material that is used as a medium for plants to grow in. Very simple, but I did like that that definition. And the different properties of soil that I want to go over with you today. There's soil properties, chemical, physical, and biological. And to start off, we're just going to talk about the physical.